remember if you guys you have crossed paths once or twice before. How do you know each other?
So I remember first learning about Munther through my friend Maria. Maria was one of my former students at Wheaton College, and Munther officiated her wedding with her husband, Saif, who's from Bethlehem. And then I was walking in the prairie on a gloomy Christmas in Chicago, listening to Munther's sermon, Christ Under the Rubble. And I was thinking of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's words that only the suffering God can help. And where is Jesus in the midst of the Holocaust? And he's with the hungry and the naked and the thirsty and the imprisoned and the suffering. And I thought, this man is preaching the true gospel and is a prophet for our time. And so when we finally met at a vigil for Gaza in DC this past summer, I was just immensely honored, and we had a good chat about the nature of courage.
Munther also endorsed your book, Andrew, and I just want to read briefly from that endorsement. Blessed are the others takes us to the heart of the teachings of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, and challenges the reader to embrace the radical vulnerability and healing compassion of Jesus' core teaching. Andrew's book unpacks the powerful relevance of Jesus' words still today and the path of peace for our world, whether in the U.S. or Palestine. A gift. Andrew, your book is a gift to us, and Munther, your words are a gift back to Andrew. I wanted to start with a few questions for Andrew, just to kind of set the table for where we're going and get a sense of the contents of your book, Andrew. So, but first, I wanted to just ask about the importance of the Beatitudes and why did you write the book? What need do you see that you feel that this book is seeking to address?
Thank you, Ben. When Jesus first gave this teaching, he was giving it in the wake of his society's 9/11 or October 7. We know that the Roman Empire had recently crucified around 2,000 people in Jesus' society, this sensational spectacle of terror and horror that was meant to produce fear and powerlessness and hopelessness and submission to injustice. And Jesus goes out into the wilderness and he has this mystical experience with God as he's processing his own inner shadows. And he hears this voice say, "You are my beloved child, I delight in you." And then Jesus comes out of the wilderness and he gives his first teaching. It's his first manifesto. It is Jesus' basic platform for everything that he wants us to know about this movement that he's starting. And he starts it in the most unlikely way, Ben. He starts by proclaiming happiness, blessedness, radical freedom and joy to the poor, to the grieving, to the nonviolent, to people who are aching for justice, to those who are willing to expand into compassion. And he goes all the way of speaking this humane happiness, this divine blessedness on those who make peace their life's work and who are willing to be persecuted for the sake of justice. You know, I think for me today, Reverend Munther is the exemplar of this final step on this path that Jesus is laying out for us, of those who are willing to seek justice, even at personal cost, and being labeled, excluded, and attacked because of their commitment to right relationships of mutual flourishing. So Jesus, in the wake of his society's own trauma and grief and heart-shattering oppression, says, let me lay out for you the path to a humane happiness that no human violence can colonize, can conquer, can kill. And rather than giving us these random well wishes, Jesus outlines this eightfold path that
Hmm.
begins in that universal place of our poverty, where we feel empty, where we feel inadequate, where we feel our raw humanity as creatures who are birthed and who are dying. And then he invites us. You can grieve. You have permission to feel what lives inside of you. Your grief can invite you into nonviolence. Your nonviolence can become active and passionate and ache for justice. And you can go all the way into a fearless confrontation with persecution because you are held by this voice from heaven that says, you are beloved, you are delighted in. As Dr. King said, you are somebody in the eyes of God. And I think, Ben, that we're living in a similar time of confusion, of mass violence, of a sense that we are at a turning of the time. And we're asking, how do we orient ourselves for our age? What is the way to become truly happy in a time of consumerism, the prosperity gospel, the religious nationalism, the promises of being made great? Again, the promises of safety and messiahship that we're receiving from our public figures. What is the way into true happiness? And out of the pain of my own life, Ben, I start this book with an open letter to the reader. Out of the death of my father, out of 50 pages of death threats that I've gotten from my work, out of the pain in my own marriage with my beloved wife, Lily, I wanted to write this book to re-invite us into this primal manifesto of Jesus, to guide us into this prophetic quality of being human that I see so beautifully in my friend Munther Isaac.
Thanks, Andrew. One of the things that struck me as I was reading the book, and just struck me again now, is how in your telling, in your framing for us of the Beatitudes, and we'll get into some more details about that in a second. The dichotomy between personal piety and social justice it's not there. It's not present. There is a kind of holistic vision that just strikes me over and over again as I'm engaging with how you're talking about the Beatitudes. It seems like, at least in my community, the Beatitudes are, as you put it, they're a random set of well wishes. The connective tissue between them is not clear to people, and we see them as tips for a pious life, and there's on the level of private individual piety. So thank you, Andrew. Could you take us a little bit more into the structure that you see built into the Beatitudes? You talk about the Beatitudes being a blessing, but also with reference to a fear that pursuing that blessing entails, and then a promise that correlates to the fear. So take us into that a little bit.
Yes, thank you. So much of the history of Christianity has deactivated the Beatitudes because, as you said, we've made these well wishes for a private spirituality. Let's remember where Jesus gave this sermon: in a public place, on a mountainside, with the full diversity of his society represented, the physically suffering, the mentally suffering, the othered, the stigmatized, the genocided. The Jerusalem insiders and power brokers were there. Representatives from the 10 cities, the foreigners, the outsiders, the pagans, they were there. The full spectrum of Jesus' society is present. And rather than giving this message in a synagogue, in a church, Jesus goes to the most public place in his society, but also a free and open space, not a religious space. And he proclaims this message in the hearing of all. So this is not something for one's own, private piety. This is an invitation into a way of life under the shadow of imperial occupation, genocidal violence, and saying, come walk this path with me. And what I'm suggesting in this book is that the beatitudinal way is this brilliantly integrated journey into humane happiness. I say that each one of the blessings is a way station on this odyssey into the fullness of our flourishing, of our well-being. And like you just laid out, Ben, what I'm trying to suggest is that each of the blessings, each of these declarations of happiness is confronting a human fear and then is inviting us forward with a promise. Let me try to unpack those very briefly. The first is blessed are the poor in spirit. I think all of us know the ache of our own emptiness, our own feeling of radical contingency, maybe of being small, maybe of being less than someone else. And the fear of the poor, and let's go right under the rubble of Gaza. That poverty, being crushed, dehumanized, cut off from the world, not given food or drink or medical care, not being given the basic dignity that we all crave, poverty of spirit. The fear of the poor is that our poverty is permanent. And so the response to that fear is so often to harden ourselves, to pretend like we're invulnerable, to try to project an image of untouchability. Oh, I'm happy. I'm successful. I'm powerful. Maybe I'm more than you poor people. Ooh, that's where so much of the superiority complex comes in. But Jesus offers this promise. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Your poverty isn't permanent, Jesus says. You will be held in an unconditional belovedness and belonging that no human violence can touch. And so you don't have to harden yourself. And so the next invitation is blessed are the grieving. They will be comforted. If we have safety to enter into our poverty, we can begin to feel what we feel, to process the grief that lives inside of us, to befriend the volatile emotions that come from the suffering of our poverty, to surrender the hardness, to do the grief work of, I have been traumatized, I have been hurt, I carry wounds, I have loss in my story. Jesus says you have permission to grieve your grief, to feel your feelings, to be an emotionally connected person with yourself. But again, the vulnerability here, Ben, the fear is that grief can boil into rage. When I begin processing my suffering, I so easily want to find someone to blame. They did it. They're the problem. They're the enemy. If we could only overcome those people, then we would be free of our grief. But Jesus gives this promise again that the grieving will be comforted. The expression in the literal language is that the grieving will have an advocate who will come beside them and cry with them. And so Jesus says, you don't have to become vengeful and blaming. In fact, you can let your grief soften you to the grief of others and make you gentle. And so the next blessing, the next way station is blessed are the non-violent. They will inherit the earth. Now, of course, as Reverend Munther knows, nonviolence is not weakness. Nonviolence is not passivity. Nonviolence is not withdrawal. Nonviolence is regulated power that responds to conflict with creativity rather than conformity. Gandhi said that Jesus was the practitioner of nonviolence par excellence. And Jesus says, you can work through your poverty, you can process your grief, and you can allow that to make you a gentle presence who is no longer trying to overcome poverty and grief by impoverishing and grieving others. You can have a new beginning with this more radical prophetic power that becomes creative in the face of othering, dehumanization, violence. When other people curse you, you can bless. When other people take from you, you can be generous. When other people try to smash your agency and turn you into a tool of servitude, you can assert your power. But of course, the fear of the nonviolent is that they will be displaced and dominated by the violent. Nonviolence, if you're not, carrying around automatic weapons and bombs raining from the sky, you become more vulnerable. Munther has become more vulnerable because he has resisted becoming aggressive, vengeful, violent. Scary to practice nonviolence, Ben, as you know. We know this from the Ethiopian Civil War. So unpopular. But Jesus speaks a promise to our fear, and he says, the non-violent will inherit the earth. Now, I think this is so powerful, Ben, because if you think about a new world, a new history, a new beginning, Munther, Jesus, this daring prophet who had the imagination to consider a new future, who's going to guide us into that new world? Who is going to be the gardeners and builders of the new creation? Jesus says it's the nonviolent. Don't worry, you won't be displaced. You will have a home that will guide the rest of humanity into their new belonging. This earth that is safe for people who have become gentle, people who have practiced regulated power instead of this reactive, vengeful abuse of power. Of course, nonviolent people can so easily, though, withdraw because you do begin to feel the pressure. You do begin to feel what's at stake. Jesus says, don't withdraw. Blessed are the hungry and thirsty for justice. Of course, when you start hungering for justice, Ben, for right relationships of mutual flourishing, you fear that you're going to starve. Hope is dangerous. Jesus says, don't fear. You will be filled. Justice so easily turns into punishment. We become condemning. We become smashing. We become the mirror image of the thing that we claim to be overcoming. Jesus says, you don't need to be afraid. Enter into a new compassion. Blessed are the compassionate. They will be mirrored with compassion. We could work through all of them, Ben. I don't want to take too much of our time. But compassion begins cleansing the soul of any sense of superiority to others, washing away supremacy. This is a major problem in America, in Israel, in Ethiopia, these identities of we have been specially chosen and have a status above others. Jesus says when you move from justice into compassion and you share presence with others in pain, the soul is cleansed. And so the next blessing is blessed are the clean-hearted, they will see God. But of course, when we have a revelation of God, Ben, we so often build a shrine around our religion. We camp out in our religiosity. Jesus says the journey to happiness doesn't stop there, friends. You don't have to be afraid of the other. Blessed are the peacemakers, they will be called children of God. This is the next step forward. And I love this so much, Ben, because when Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, he's confronting this core fear that peacemakers have, that I will be labeled as a radical, as a traitor, as a terrorist, because I refuse to align myself with the violent addiction of my society, and I no longer ally myself with these supremacist identities and groups. Oh, Andrew, you're a terrorist. Oh, Andrew, you are secretly working for the overthrow of the government. Oh, Andrew, you're against the church. You must be a heretic. And Jesus says, the peacemakers will be called children of God. This is the ultimate anti-gaslighting right here. You will be correctly identified for who you are as a child of God when you practice peace. Peace is the divine DNA. It's what Jesus sees when he has the revelation of God, that gentle dove descending, saying, you are my beloved child, I delight in you. And Ben, the climax of the Beatitudinal way, again, I think it takes us to Munther. Peacemakers confront the fear that, okay, if I am willing to make peace my life's work, not just a slogan, not a hobby, but my core vocation in everything that I do, whether I'm a parent, a teacher, a professor, a doctor, a street sweeper, if I make peace my life's work, I will lose the approval of my society. And everyone wants to be accepted. I don't know about you, Munther. I want to be accepted. It's in me, man. I don't like it when people say hateful things to me. I describe it as soul vandalism. Jesus says, will you willingly surrender the approval of others to become a peacemaker and go all the way? And the last blessing is, blessed are the persecuted for the sake of justice. They will, the kingdom of heaven is theirs. So this is the strange climax, Ben, of the connective tissue of Jesus' pathway to humane happiness, to blessedness, to true freedom, is go all the way to paying the price for truth, love, and justice. Be willing to become the other and know that the other is blessed, is safely held in the love of God. Jesus says, rejoice and be happy. You've become like the prophets. This is a quality of humanity that has become invincible in the face of human violence, and you have nothing to prove and nothing to lose.
Wow.
Powerful.
Yeah. And I mean, I myself and my community, we've been reading the Beatitudes. I've been reading the Beatitudes for decades, since Sunday school. And never have I heard it presented with such clarity, such power, and as, like we were saying earlier, as a kind of coherent teaching, as a path, as you've put it, that has steps that lead one to the other. And that's one of my takeaways from this book and from hearing you talk about it, is just how they connect to each other and form a way of life, as you put it. So thank you, Andrew. Munther, I'd like to talk with you a little bit as well. As a Palestinian pastor, I'm curious how we just heard this, Andrew talk about the Beatitudes. How do you take some of that insight, that wisdom, and your thinking about the Beatitudes into your role as a pastor of a congregation that is also being invited into this way of life in the unique poverties and violences and challenges that your congregation faces?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that attracted me about the book of Andrew is that it does a great job of applying the Beatitudes into the modern context. And by that, I don't mean the current situation for me and my life, but the overall reality, the context, the political, the social context we live in. Even, what I love is giving the Beatitudes more contemporary, maybe relevant terminology that makes it so real today. Because I think many times, especially in the evangelical traditions, we're accustomed to reading the Beatitudes in a very individualistic and spiritual manner. I've never saw them this way. And I've always, said, when Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mountain, love your enemies, or blessed are the peacemakers, he didn't mean that we should grab a cup of coffee with our neighbor and, go through our differences. He was talking in a politically charged environment. And trying to apply the Beatitudes in Palestine today is very difficult. The whole sermon is difficult. Love your enemies, walk the extra mile. And I've had numerous conversations with especially young people about it, who would always argue with me that it's so unreal. It's so ideal, as if Jesus is this ideal teacher, and we can't apply his teachings. And I always, when I teach about the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mountain in general, I always tell them, it's one of two. It's either Jesus was so out of touch, so naive, he had no idea what he was talking about, or he is presenting us with the most radical way of confronting our reality and solving the problems of our world. It's one of the two. I don't see any other option. And it's so easy to dismiss them. We can spiritualize them. As I said, we can apply them into the individual sphere. In some forms of dispensationalism, they make them an element of the kingdom somewhere in the future, not applying that to us. Or we can wrestle with them, and we can allow, wrestle with the word of God, the same way Andrew did with the book. He looked so deep into these words with the belief that they have a solution to our problems today. And I think the brilliance of the Sermon on the Mountain and the Beatitudes is that they present us with a counter to the norms of our cultures and our world today. And I think this is what Andrew tried to capture, because everything in the Beatitudes is opposite to the ways of the world. I mean, if you think of how it began, look at the political environment today. Look at the kind of leaders that are respected, the powerful, the arrogant, those who dismiss others. And everything in the Beatitudes is the exact opposite of that. And so when I look at them as a pastor in Palestine, in a context when many of the things Andrew described, we've been on the receiving end for. We've been on the receiving end of ideologies of supremacy. We've been on the receiving end of the ideologies of might is right, violence, wars, displacements. We've been dehumanized and demonized. To us, the Beatitudes give us comfort, because we all of a sudden discover we're on the right side, according to Jesus, because we're the one who are mourning. We are the one who are poor in spirit. We're the one who've been talking about peace. And definitely, we're the ones who are thirsty for justice. That's what we are asking for. So when we read the Beatitudes, actually, we discover that, in a way, Jesus is talking about us. And it feels empowering, because when everyone is against you, when you feel powerless by the standards of the world, when, as I said, you are always on the receiving end of what I call empire in my writings, it's as if, you are marginalized and, as I said, powerless. You read the Beatitudes, and all of a sudden you are empowered, because, as I said, we're on Jesus' side, and it's good to preach. And to be honest, if you go around in Palestine, in Bethlehem or in Ramallah, and especially within the Christian community, the Beatitude is among the most common and well-known scripture that we know, that we memorize from school, in Sunday school, from pulpits, because, as I said, it's not just a very relevant text, but it's a very empowering text. And as I said, the key here is in this dichotomy that I said. It's either Jesus was out of touch, he had no idea what he was talking about, or he was the most brilliant and radical teacher. And the problem is in us for not taking him seriously enough.
Wow. I keep thinking as we're talking more about it, maybe strangely, about Cain. And there are certain parallels that maybe don't work there, but Cain, after he takes Abel's life, is cast into a land of wandering. He's going to be a wanderer, and he comes face to face with vulnerability. And God says, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you a sign, so that no one will murder you. And it's making me think, Andrew, of the how each of these blessings has a fear that correlates with it. Cain is dealing with fear of vulnerability. And instead of, he actually it takes the anti-beatitudinal way. He stops moving along the path and decides to build, take matters into his own hands. And instead of being this wanderer and embracing that vulnerability or accepting it, he resists it and builds a city. And we are all Cain in some way. We live in a land of wandering and vulnerability, and we're faced with this choice: will we accept the vulnerability in this path that God is laying out, or will we build our own cities and our own weapons and bombs and take matters into our own hands?
Ben, could I say something there
Yes.
quickly? That's a brilliant connection with Cain. Notice in that story that Cain thinks that his brother Abel has something that he doesn't have. He thinks that he has some kind of special status with God that Cain doesn't have. How does Cain respond to his poverty of spirit? He tries to kill his brother. Let's eliminate that person. Let's literally reduce them to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the story says that the ground shrieks, the ground cries out with this blood. And then God takes Cain back onto the beatitudinal way, because when God is doing justice to Cain, is God going to kill Cain back? Is God going to imitate violence and play this repetitive game? No, instead, as you just mentioned, God marks Cain to protect him. And here we see how justice expands again into compassion. God has compassion on the first murderer in the Bible and wants to protect this person from this repetitive cycle. But we know that Cain goes on, as you said, to build cities, and it said that he is the ancestor of the metal workers. So in many ways, he's like the great grandfather of the weapon makers and these kind of builders of these supremacist civilizations, which will eventually go on to enslave the people of Abraham. And this begins the cycle of trauma that will lead us into the violence that we see the Israelites inflicting on the people of Canaan. So I think this is a very insightful note here, Ben, about the beatitudinal way is present in both how it's violated in the story of Cain and Abel and how God takes us back into the path of compassion. But what happens when we refuse to finish our journey, and how this leads to these supremacist empires, as Reverend Munther has said?
Munther, you just, in your comments just a minute ago, you were explaining that you see the Beatitudes when you're talking with your congregants as either kind of pie in the sky teaching that comes, is out of touch, or it's the most brilliant, most important teaching. And I think that I know which of those two you accept. And it comes through a little bit in actually how you wrote the endorsement for Andrew's book. You used the definite article when you said, the Beatitudes are the path to peace in the U.S. and in Palestine and anywhere. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that definite article. Why is it this the path to peace rather than a path to peace or an option for people?
Well, of course, I love Jesus. I love his teachings. I believe in the inherent divine truth in them. At the same time, I think when you consider the alternative, and I think the Beatitudes in a way allude to the alternative because it's everything that is opposite to what Jesus is saying, you realize what's happening in our world. And it's the result of all of that is what we're saying: wars, vengeance, supremacy, eliminating the others in different ways. A genocide is not just when you kill someone, but when you totally eliminate and disregard or dehumanize or take the rights of others. And we see it, as I said, as the result of everything the Beatitudes is not. We live in a world that teaches you not, to be ruthless. I look at some of the terminology that's being tossed around: peace through power or through strength. As if that works.
I hear people say, proponents of the war in Gaza say, we should just let Israel get the job done, do it quickly so that we can arrive at a place of peace.
It's an approach that is devoid of mercy and compassion. And honestly, it's an approach that does not work because you're creating more resentment, hatred, unless you just want to nuke Palestinians and get rid of all of us. And then will that even solve the problem? So the fact that these approaches are devoid of compassion, so you want to reach at peace, but at what cost? And would that really lead to, because I think the brilliance of Jesus's teachings is not simply that, the idea, why did Jesus say, for example, love your enemy? I think behind that is a reminder that our ultimate goal is not to defeat or have vengeance or eliminate the enemy, but to turn the enemy into a friend. Once you think that way, you think more creatively, more humanly, and then you're more in line, as I said, with the teachings of Jesus. We have tried the alternative, and the alternative has caused so much death and trauma and suffering. And as we all know, it's an unending cycle. Where is it going to stop? Again, the problem with the concept of an eye for an eye is that it's not really an eye for an eye today. You would think that, you would wish it was an eye for. Today, it's an eye for 1,000 eyes, and it never stops. And whoever has more power, wealth, and weapons, inflicts more and more pain. So when I say that Jesus' teachings are the path to peace, and I'm definitely not claiming any superiority to us Christians, for sure. All I'm saying is that we have tried the way of the empire. It didn't work. We have tried the logic of supremacy. We've seen the results. Are we courageous enough? Do we have the courage, not just to admit that we were wrong, but to try this alternative way that invites us to confront our fears, as Andrew said, our vulnerability, and engage in this process of first looking inwardly, and then once being healed, we can heal and engage in healing our world. I keep repeating something all over whenever I speak to young people. Are we taking Jesus seriously enough? I think we love to benefit from the free salvation he offers, especially, as I said, I grew up in evangelical circles and I know all about it, but the idea of peacemaking, Jesus in the Beatitudes says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be children of God, right? We grew up learning that by raising your hand to a prayer and saying, I accept, you become a child of God. You wish it was this easy. Jesus invites you to this really difficult process in which you humanize the other, you humanize even your enemy, you learn to see even God's image in the other, you confront your own supremacy, your own biases, and sometimes you pay price for taking sides, for siding with justice. Peacemakers, these are the children of God. I wish we take Jesus seriously enough.
One of the reasons why I love the metaphor of a path with a trail, with a trailhead and way stations, Andrew, is it suggests the difficulty and challenge of following the path. There will be cost every step along the way. I just got back from a hike in the White Mountains, and we had, thousands of feet of elevation change over the course of, 8 hours of hiking each day. And we ended that multi-day hike and we were spent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. I think that's maybe an assumption as well. Often, the kind of like cross-stitched, framed, nice Beatitudes that you put on your wall for your guests to read there is an implication that it's nice and pleasant. And that's not what we're saying at all.
Yeah, in some ways it's nasty and painful. Are we willing to go into the slum of our poverty? Are we willing to look under the rubble of Gaza and to see the blood, to hear the cries, to look into the face of the child? Are we willing to confront that fear that I am not enough? Ben, I am convinced that superiority and supremacy is ironically rooted in a deep fear of inferiority. And so we project superiority to try to compensate for what we fear that we lack. If you're confident in who you are, you don't need to project anything. You don't need to be higher than anyone. You don't need to be, more at the center of attention than anyone. If you're good, you're good. Jesus takes us at that trailhead to the place of poverty of spirit, that inner ache, that open wound, and says, let's start the work there. And I think, Ben, one of the reasons why we see, whether in Zionism, this notion that we have this special relationship with God, we have this historic heritage, we have this superior right that other people don't have. I think so much of this is unprocessed pain. And I don't say this to belittle anyone. I see it again in myself. When I'm starting to get my ego, when I'm starting to puff myself up, when I'm starting to try to become, bigger, it's usually because Andrew is facing a vulnerability inside and I'm trying to cover it. I'm trying to mask it. And like you said, this is not cross stitch on the wall. This is the muck and the pain and the reality of being human, that we all experience this poverty of spirit. And Jesus is inviting us, rather than to mask it, to hide it, to suppress it, to befriend it and to accept that we are accepted at the place where we feel most empty. And then that opens the grief. But I love what you were saying about the path and the elevation change. I mean, I'm not a professional hiker by any stretch, and I can get winded and tired and wiped. I mean, if you want to talk about, let's start with poverty, and then let's start talking about your grief, that's already like a radical elevation shift right there. And then, let's go to nonviolence next. Now you're really climbing. So this is very helpful, Ben. This is not just, nice and easy. This is quite challenging. It's dirty work that ultimately leads to the cleansing of the soul and the cleansing of our relations.
And if we follow your way of reading the Beatitudes, Andrew, of the progression and one leading to the other, it makes perfect sense that they end with embracing rejection and persecution. It's not simply about, that you are not accepted by others, but actually, if you want to follow the Beatitudes, it's a call to embrace being rejected, persecuted, and even the path of suffering. And I think that's why we resent it. That's why we don't want to go there. It's so hard. You will be resisted on the simple level. When I preach about, or when I teach it, the idea of blessed are the meek. How do I preach this today to Palestinians who are being raised by a genocide, who are being massacred? When death surrounds you, and I say you will be satisfied, you will be comforted. You will be rejected even by the mere idea of suggesting what Jesus is saying. Are you willing to embrace that? Are you willing to, to be honest with you, whenever I speak in Palestinian circles or in Arab circles, many people love what I'm saying. Many people say, we wish, we're so grateful for your courage, the way that you speak for Gaza, the fact that you are a pastor and willing to take the heat and call it for what it is. And I go and engage, especially again in Palestinian circles. They love it until I start talking about nonviolence. And that's when, that's when you lose us. And I say, well, whether you like it or not, this is what Jesus is teaching, and I follow the teachings of Jesus, and I actually believe they work. I think that we, even as Palestinians, need to be more serious about considering, and then it allows me to talk about MLK and Gandhi and others. But, if I want just to please people, I can avoid it, or I can simply say, I understand why violence is needed. And by the way, to jump from one topic to the other, this is what shocks us as Palestinian theologians when we look at what's coming from the West, the just war theory, and it's as if war solves things. And we're a bit, the irony for us is that the very same Western theologians who criticize us and call us out because we support Palestinian cause, and as if we support Hamas and all of that, themselves support violence. Themselves support a genocide. At least we are consistent because we believe in nonviolence. We've been against nonviolence when both sides are killed. We've been against one. But to see how even a war of genocide was endorsed, and the idea that the killing of 16,000 children is the justice of God. I mean, really? Is this the way of Jesus? The justice of God is the killing of 16,000 children. And it shows you, again, the dynamic of power, because it's the powerful that justifies violence and gives the right of one side to exercise violence. I mean, by your own logic, by the just war theory, do Palestinians have the right to resist and use violence and kill Israelis? By your own logic, they do. You see the inconsistency, but of course, because we are inferior, only one side has the right to defend themselves and kill and massacre. When the other does it, it's terrorism and so on. And what's lost in all of this discussion, is the ethics of Jesus. It's precisely that, the ethics of Jesus. And that's when we will continue to say to the world, are you taking the ethics of Jesus seriously enough?
We're meeting on Monday, November 4th. Something really big is happening in the United States tomorrow. We're going to the polls and having a presidential election, and that in the midst of a political milieu and moment in the U.S. that is rife with empire and violence and nationalism and prosperity gospel and supremacy. I wanted to ask, as we're wrapping up, we've just heard some powerful reflections from Pastor Munther about how the Beatitudes speaks to the Palestinian context. I wonder if we can finish up with any comments from either of you about how they speak to the U.S. context.
I would just refer back to what Reverend Munther has said. We have tried the opposite of the Beatitudes, and look where it's taking us. Blessed are the rich. Blessed are the laughing. Blessed are the vengeful and violent. Blessed are the people that turn justice into condemnation. Blessed are the people who don't need compassion and mercy. Blessed are the people who aren't really looking for God. Blessed are the people who think peace is cheap, pie in the sky, utopian idealism. Blessed are the people who don't get persecuted because they've got all the power. We've tried this path, and it's created a cycle of othering in which we see the other as an enemy, not just someone to disagree with, but someone to eliminate, as Munther has said. And this is producing, again, this strange flailing between we're untouchable, there's nobody like us, we're the best, and we're coming to the end. If we don't get power, everything is lost. This kind of doomsday apocalyptic fear-mongering. And I would just say that the Beatitudinal way takes us in a fresh direction. When we are processing our poverty and receiving our belovedness, when we're processing our grief and receiving the comfort of God and one another, when we enter into that radicalism of nonviolence that Munther talked about, we don't have to rise and fall with these bipolar tendencies of our culture, these polarizing tendencies of our culture to be, messianic, we're the best, to be alarmist, we're falling apart, everything is lost. We can continue to be a peaceful presence, a respectful listening presence, a presence of Jesus in the midst of all that's going on. And Ben, let me simply say that the Beatitudinal way ends with Jesus saying, you are the salt of the earth. You are the city on the hill. Not the American empire, not the Israeli empire, not the Ethiopian empire, not Hamas. These vulnerable, courageous people who have chosen to walk from their poverty to the pain of being rejected for the sake of pursuing justice, they turn the lights on in reality. They preserve our humanity. And so I would say to us here on November 4th, before this election, whatever happens, whoever quote unquote wins, the only way to actually win is to enter into that radical freedom of the blessing that Jesus describes. And that's a winning that embraces all. Blessed are the others. When we can accept that wisdom, Ben, we can't lose, because we know that we're all being held in the radical love of God.
Thank you, Andrew. Very powerful. Pastor Munther?
Yeah, as
that's life happening at Pastor Munther's house. I love it.
Yeah, as an outsider looking into American politics and the elections, I really sometimes wish Americans see the world through the eyes of others and how we see what's happening in America, the politics, and how this country continues to present itself as the beacon and leading the world and so on. I look at the amount of arrogance that's being presented. It's not love for power, but lust for power. The rhetoric of fear and demonizing the other. As Andrew said, if one side wins, the other is convinced it's not just the end of the world, it's the end of humanity, you know, and the level of hatred that's being promoted about the other. And then I think of the amount of money spent in this elections. I mean, it's unbelievable. I think one candidate raised $1 billion. My goodness, isn't there a better use to our resources than this? And then I'm reminded that over the last year alone, the United States provided Israel with $17.9 billion in weapon aid. $17.9 billion. You know, I tried to count the zeros in this number and then divide them by the number of Palestinians killed in Gaza, at least the ones we know. It's almost $500,000 for each Palestinian killed.
Oh my gosh.
Can you think of that? Can you think of, you know, how money is used, how power is being used? And there is this impression that it doesn't matter how we get to power, but once we get there, because this is the most powerful position in the world, we can help the world. We can save the world. It's as if, you know, each side presents the other as, you know, presents the leader as the savior of the world. It doesn't matter how we get there. It doesn't matter what messages we think. You know, when I mentioned that, you know, when you look at the teachings of Jesus, it's one of two. It's clear to me which side American politics have chosen. Jesus' teachings are so naive, out of touch with the world, they don't work. Let's get to power. It doesn't matter how we get there. Let's spend all the money and resources and the lobbying we need to get there, and then we can save the world. So all I can say is how much the United States, like everyone, how much it needs the ethics of Jesus. I don't want to put it in a romantic way that it needs Jesus. No, how much it needs the ethics of Jesus. Precisely what Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mountain and in the Beatitude.
Wow. You know what? That is the political message for our moment as we go into these elections. Thank you, Munther. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you both for your wisdom, your insight. You give them to us as gifts, and I receive them that way, and I know that our listeners do as well. So keep following that difficult beatitudinal path. People are watching. People are watching. I know I'm watching, and in so many ways, the Lord is using you as an example. So thank you for that. It means a lot. I would like to invite listeners to join us, the Network of Evangelicals for the Middle East, which has hosted this conversation. We're going to be together in person in California in the first week of December. We hope that you'll join us. We think that being together in person, even though the costs are high and it takes time out of your week, that being together is worth it. It provides opportunity for holy friendships to form, for deep spiritual friendships to form, for the kinds of relationships that help people follow the difficulties of living a beatitudinal way in the world differently. And so if you can join us, we do have a virtual option as well. So if you can't join us in person, please consider that as well. You can read a little bit more about it. It's our annual forum. You can read a little bit more on the website, NEME.network/forum. NEME is spelled NEME. .network/forum. And with that, gratitude. Keep following the beatitudinal way.
Very grateful, Ben. Thanks for your hospitality. Reverend Munther, you have all my respect and love. My prayers are with you.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure. Thank you.